And welcome to you on this Wednesday, March 17th. It's St. Patrick's Day. It's Lock It Up Sports Talk. My name is Logan Lockhart. Joining me, the college basketball expert himself. He's with me on the show today, Kellen Forrest. We're going to talk about the NCAA men's tournament that starts on Friday. And here we are 2 days before a whole preview. We're going to go rapid fire, get into it all. I know you have a lot on your mind when it comes to this. Kellen, thanks for joining me, my man.
Very happy to be on it, Logan. And I got to say, the term expert might be stretching it a little bit, but I'll take that anytime I can get it.
I wanted to throw that in there because I knew you would have your doubts if I told you beforehand this is what I'm going to call you, but it is true. It is true. You are an expert, and that's what we're going to go with because it's only the truth on this show, as you know, on Lock It Up. All right. Can we address the elephant in the room here? There's no Kentucky. There's no Duke. The first time since 1976 that both are out of this tournament. For people that haven't been following college basketball all year, it has been a weird year, of course, and we haven't seen the tournament be played in 2 years. And here we are, the return of the NCAA tournament, and you don't see these two teams. What does that mean?
I mean, to the basketball, casual NCAA basketball fan, maybe they're a little disappointed. They can't just look at their bracket and say, okay, I'm going to have Kentucky and Duke in my Final Four. But as like a college basketball purist, I think it's great. Like there's going to be some other teams that are going to be getting the spotlight. These other programs that have been doing well for years, finally, there's no Kentucky Duke because Kentucky Duke, right, we're still talking about them. They're not even in the tournament just because they generate headlines, right? And as a Kentucky fan myself, it's been a tough year. But yeah, as you point out, no Kentucky, no Duke, no programs like Arizona, no Louisville. Yep. So there's some big name programs that are not in the NCAA tournament this year. But I think it's good for the sport because it gives some of these other teams like the Illinois, like the Baylors that have been good for the past few years, it gives them some of the spotlight.
And you know, it's really interesting. Now the spotlight is almost turned to Ohio State, Alabama in the national championship game for college football. That was the game. And here we are. They're two teams that everyone's kind of got their eyes on, right?
Yeah, no, that's I mean, they're on opposite sides of the bracket, so there is a chance that we could get a double Ohio State Alabama college sports finals. I mean, I'm not picking it, but I wouldn't advise, like, if you wanted to do that yourself, I'm not going to tell you it's a crazy pick because those two teams could definitely find themselves playing in the championship on April 5th.
But if I said Final Four, I want to put those two teams in the Final Four. Would that be a fair pick?
I think it would be a fair pick. Yeah, no, I mean, especially Alabama. Alabama is a popular pick right now just because of the region they're in. They're in the East region, and that is the region with Michigan, who is probably the shakiest number one seed. If you had to look, if you're ranking the number one seeds, I would rank Michigan as the most likely to fail out before the Final Four, specifically because they don't have their senior leader, Isaiah Livers, for the first weekend of the tournament. He's a 13-point per game guy, and he's going to be out at least for the first weekend. They say they hopefully could get him back from if they make it to the second weekend, but they won't have him the first weekend. So Michigan is a little vulnerable. They haven't been playing their best without him down the stretch. And so that's a region where Alabama, you look at Alabama and Texas in the bottom of that region. I'm suggesting whoever comes out of that Alabama-Texas game in the Elite Eight or in the Sweet 16 is going to go through and be the Final Four representative from the East region.
So Michigan to use the shakiest one seed out of the 4 1 seeds here. And that's interesting. You talk about the East region here. It sounds to me like if you're not picking the 1 seed Michigan, you call them shaky. That sounds to me like one of the strongest regions here. That's the region we should keep our eye on.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan, like, even if Michigan wins, we're assuming they're going to win their first game because it's only ever happened once, right? Not pull up Virginia. But if LSU or St. Bonaventure get through, specifically LSU, I think that's a dangerous second-round matchup for Michigan just because LSU, they've been playing well. They lost a close one to Alabama in the SEC championship game, but they've got some players. Trendon Watford from LSU, he'd be dangerous for Michigan, again, especially without Livers. Michigan has not been playing well without him in the lineup. And so I think, yeah, if you're looking at a region where there could be 3 or 4 teams that are favored to come out of it, it is the East region to me. The rest of them, I think it's pretty, like, my money would be on the 1 seeds maybe a 2, but the East region with Michigan is probably the one where you could convince me 3 or 4 teams were going to come out of there.
Intriguing, and that's what we like, an open field. With no Duke, no Kentucky, here we go, the open field this year. 2 teams I'm keeping an eye on here, Oklahoma State, and then Georgia Tech is quite hot right now. Do you like those 2 picks for dark horses potentially in this tournament?
I do, and again, like that, they're both in the Midwest region and Illinois region. My only thing with Georgia Tech is they actually are playing Loyola Chicago in the first round, which, if people don't remember, was Loyola Chicago made that miracle run to the Final Four years ago as a double-digit seed. They have Sister Jean on their side. I don't know if everybody remembers their loving mascot, Sister Jean. And she just announced that she's actually going to be at these games. So that's where I'm worried about Georgia Tech with Sister Jean in the building. Loyola Chicago actually probably should have been a higher seed than they are. They were ranked all year. For them to be an 8 seed seems a little bit strange to me. And then you look at Oklahoma State. For those that don't know, Oklahoma State, Cade Cunningham, probably going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. So every game they play with him, they're going to be in. He's a second half superstar. He kind of feels out the game in the first half, and then the second half he just comes out and just dominates, right? My only worry about the Oklahoma State pick is if things go the way they plan, and I hope they do, because this is a matchup I have my eye on and I'm hoping for. They would play Illinois in the Sweet 16, and Illinois is probably the hottest team in the country right now. And so they would match up against, it would be Illinois, Oklahoma State, Cade Cunningham versus Ayo Dosunmu. It would be a marquee matchup, and I'm hoping we get it. I just don't know if Oklahoma State has the size to deal with Illinois, who has another big guy by the name of Kofi Cockburn. He's only 6'8". He's about 280 pounds, I think. So Oklahoma State had trouble with Texas's big guys in the Big 12 championship. So my worry if they played Illinois is they would struggle down low. But with Cade Cunningham on your team, Oklahoma State, I'm never going to suggest going against them.
Well, he's the guy, right? And it's so fun. One of the greatest things about this tournament I love is seeing the number 1 projected pick and seeing how far he can take that team. It adds a little bit of storytelling to it, especially in preparation for the draft. Cade Cunningham's the guy I got my eyes on, Arlington, Texas guy, now Oklahoma State. And you mentioned with Loyola and Georgia Tech, that's an unfavorable matchup for Georgia Tech. They got to feel a little slighted here. I want you to elaborate on that. Georgia Tech, if they didn't get that unfavorable matchup and they got kind of an easier path across here, how would you feel about them?
I mean, I would feel great. I think what you really have to look at going into this tournament is who's playing their best basketball at the right time. Like in any sport, right? Who's peaking going into the postseason? And Georgia Tech is doing just that, right? They have some great players on their team. Moses Wright was ACC Player of the Year, and they just won the ACC tournament, taking down a good Florida State team, right? So you're right. Any of these teams, you look at Georgia Tech, you look at Oregon State, who's a 12 seed in that same Midwest region, who was kind of a surprise conference tournament winner. These teams are playing their best basketball at the right time. So you're right. I love Georgia Tech. I just think they got a tough matchup in Loyola. And then if they get through that matchup, who do they play? Only the hottest team in the country in Illinois. So I like Georgia Tech. They'll be in both those games, but I have Loyola coming out of that first game just because they know how to win. They've been in they've made a run in the tournament before, but Georgia Tech is peaking at the right time. So you could pick them and feel good about it.
That's what it is. That's the nature of the tournament. There's 2 big elements to this tournament: peaking at the right time, and then who you play. Georgia Tech, yeah, they're peaking at the right time, but then it balances out because they don't have a favorable matchup, right? So the 2 elements, both of them got to be in your favor sometimes. Georgia Tech, they only have one of the 2. Let's go to a number 1 seed, Gonzaga, who's looking here. A lot of people are picking them to win this thing. That usually indicates to you what when so many people are taking one team?
I mean, it means that they're the best team in the country and have been all year. And anybody who's saying like this is the same old Gonzaga of old, they haven't really watched this Gonzaga team this year, because I know Gonzaga, they've fallen short the past few years. They're always around the number 1, number 2 seed, it seems, but they just can't get it done. They made one national championship, couldn't get it done there. But this Gonzaga team is different. They have everything you want in a team. They have veteran leaders in Corey Kispert and Drew Timme. And then they have a stud young point guard, a freshman point guard in Jalen Suggs, who will also be a lottery pick. So, I mean, I have never been a huge Gonzaga guy. I usually have them going out earlier in my brackets, but this year I can't pick against them. And one of the reasons why is if you look at their bracket, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4 seed in their bracket. So we're looking at Iowa, we're looking at Kansas, and we're looking at the number 4 seed Virginia. Gonzaga played them all this year and crushed all of them. Like, the games weren't even that close, right? So those are teams they're playing again, they're clearly comfortable with. So I don't really see much of a opposition to the Final Four for Gonzaga.
This is a different year for Gonzaga that you're predicting, and you're not entertaining any of the conversations about, oh, same old Gonzaga, come on, don't take them to go all the way. That's a trap. You're not buying it at all.
No, I'm not. This is a different team. Again, they have 3 All-Americans on, like, first team, second team, right? And 1 honorable mention. And then they got a Canadian point guard, Andrew Nembhard, coming off the bench for them. He's a veteran guy. He's been in the tournament before. He used to be with Florida. So yeah, no, this is a team that I have in my Final Four. I think the majority of experts, so-called experts, would have them in their Final Four. But that's the great thing about the tourney is, right? It's like everybody says, oh, this team's going to the Final Four, but maybe they do lose out. I'm going to give you a little parallel. The last time there was an undefeated team heading into the tournament, it was the 2015 Kentucky team. Who did they lose to? A Big Ten team with the National Player of the Year, a bunch of white guys that could shoot, and that was Wisconsin. Kentucky lost to Wisconsin that year. And Iowa has a very similar makeup to that Wisconsin team. They got Luka Garza, probably the National Player of the Year. They can get hot and shoot the lights out. So if Iowa does get through and they meet Gonzaga in that Elite Eight matchup, maybe we see history repeat themselves, because we haven't had an undefeated team that went through the regular season undefeated and the tournament undefeated since the 1976 Indiana team. So there's a lot of pressure on Gonzaga this year.
There's pressure. There's pressure when you're undefeated, and then you enter this tournament, and now you look at all the projections, but that's a matchup that I would keep an eye on, that what you just said in the Elite Eight. That's something that you can kind of project might happen, and that sounds like a close game about to happen. But are they your favorite, Gonzaga?
They are not. I have them in my final, but if I'm giving you my national champion right now, I'm giving you Illinois. And I just think they're playing their best basketball. They've beaten good teams down the stretch here. That's the only thing I worry about Gonzaga is they were obviously tested earlier on. They played some really good teams and beat them badly, but their West Coast Conference isn't as strong. They got a little bit tested against a solid BYU team in the conference championship, and they just haven't really been playing the same caliber of teams that Illinois has been playing. The Big Ten is by far the best conference this year, and Illinois has been just rolling teams, right? And they have stud players in Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, as I already mentioned. They got a great little point guard. His name is Curbelo. Watch for him in this tournament. He's electric. He's small. He's a little bit out of control sometimes, but he does some amazing things. So my pick for the championship right now is the Fighting Illini.
You like Illinois. There you go.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a Final Four, I'm kind of gauging who you like, and we'll get to that right at the end for the remaining 3 teams, which we can guess at this point, but we'll confirm it at the end. Now, let's get to some Canadian content before we jump right back into a general scope of this tournament. You've done great work. You've profiled some of the best Canadians in this tournament. What stands out to you the most in terms of Canadian content for people in Canada to keep an eye on?
I would say, one, you have a Canadian player on the best team in the country. I mentioned him a little bit earlier, Andrew Nembhard. He was a 2-year guy at Florida, decided to transfer to Gonzaga. And he comes off the bench for Gonzaga, but he is, don't get it wrong, he's a key player for their team. When he comes into the game, he can kind of feel out the game, control things, help Jalen Suggs, who he is a freshman, right? Like regardless how good these freshmen are, they're still young. They're still 18, 19 years old, right? So having a veteran guy coming off the bench is huge. And then you look at Oregon. So Oregon is the number 7 seed in Gonzaga's region. They got 2 Canadians, in Chris Duarte and Eugene Omarui, and they're both key guys for Oregon. So that's a team with a lot of Canadian content. And then you want a fun Canadian guy to watch. You watch Purdue, because Purdue has a 7'1" guy named Zach Edey, and he's huge out there. You can't miss him when he's on the floor, that's for sure. And he's been playing his best basketball down the stretch here. So that's another Canadian guy to watch for. I think there's a total of 25 in this year's tournament, which it's huge for the game, right? We've had some great Canadians in the NCAA tournament over the years, but the numbers are just growing every year, right? For how many are actually in this tournament.
So 25 this year. Off the top of your head, in 2019, where was it at? Was it, under 20?
Yeah, I don't have the exact number in my head, to be honest, but yeah, I just know this year there was a record for players in the NCAA Division I, right? Canadian players, right? So that's got to mean that things are just going to be on the up and up as we move forward here.
Oh, and I guarantee you, we compare it to a decade ago, go back 10 years, and you're not even close to 25 in the tournament. Guaranteed. Michigan is the shakiest team for you as a number 1 seed to get bounced relatively early. You like them after the first round, but then you say they're quite shaky. What other 1, 2, or 3 seeds do you look at and say, I'm not too sure about them making a run?
I mean, I look at the Kansas, like Kansas isn't, everybody sees them. They're one of the big names, right? The Kansases, they're blue blood, as people call them, right? But they're not the same Kansas team as we've gotten used to, right? They struggled kind of mid at parts in the season. And again, they've got a tough second round matchup against USC, who has a guy by the name of Evan Mobley, who will also be a lottery pick this year in the draft. So if USC does get past Wichita State or Drake, which they might not, but if USC does, I like USC getting past Kansas, because this Kansas team is just not what you're used to as coming from a Kansas team. If the tournament happens last year, Kansas easily probably wins the national championship, but they lost all their best guys, right? So Kansas is one. Don't just see their name and put them in the Elite Eight, because it's not the same Kansas team.
It's really come full circle here, because I remember about a year ago, we're sitting in a hotel room in Tampa, Florida, and we hear the news that the tournament won't happen in 2020. And I'm right there with you, and there was a lot of disappointment, but we understood it at the time. What does it mean to you to have this tournament back, and what does it mean for the country?
I mean, it's just a huge, it's my favorite sporting event of the year. And I'm assuming it's a lot of other people's, just because of the unpredictability of it, right? And how you can watch basketball from waking up till you go to bed for the first couple of days. But I think it's a big thing. Like, things are going to look a little bit different this year, as if the listeners don't know, everything's in Indiana. We're all in one bubble, right? So that could make some things a little bit different. They're not the different regions. Everybody's in the same bubble. But yeah, no, it's just huge. Like, things were a little bit shaky, and the NCAA men's tournament was probably one of the only sports that never got closure last year, right? All these other sports took a break, and then they came back and figured out who their champions were. But in March Madness, we never got it. We just never got it. They just canceled it, so things were left up in the air. So it's just going to be great. I'm excited to sit on my butt all Friday, Saturday, and watch the first round, and because that's always my favorite 2 days of the tourney.
That's a great point, because there was no closure. Everyone else kind of continued at some point. There was just no 2020 NCAA tournament. It just never happened. So now you have it, 2021, and it's the return, right? And whatever 2020 was, it just never happened. Now, rapid fire, strongest region.
I would go to the Midwest region, Illinois region, just because as I've mentioned before, this Houston team, watch out for them down below in the number 2 seed. They don't get a lot of coverage just because they're in a smaller conference, but this team can really play. And Oklahoma State, we've talked about them before, but they should not have been a 4 seed in my eyes. They should have been a 3 seed. They've beaten a bunch of the 3 seeds that are on that earlier in the season. They were just getting big wins down the stretch. As a lot of people agree that they should not have been a 4 seed. They should have been at least a 3. So that's where I look at and then I just look at Illinois. They're playing their best basketball, right? So I look at the Midwest and say it's the strongest region, and I look at Gonzaga's and say it says in the West, I say that's the weakest region.
Weakest region in the West. Now, what's the most wide open region? And maybe it applies to both, either weak or strong.
Yeah, I mean, the wide open region I think is probably the East, just because of the Michigan struggles. And then you look at Alabama and Texas. Like I've mentioned before, I've talked about Alabama before, but this Texas team is also playing their best basketball. They just had a big Big 12 conference championship win. They got a guy by the name of Jericho Sims who kind of came out of nowhere in the conference tournament game, dominated, had like something like 21 points and 15 rebounds, both career marks. He was supposed to be their third best big guy this year, right? So if they suddenly get some sort of miraculous tournament run from him, look out, because this Texas team could be dangerous. And I know that probably sounds good to you.
It does, Longhorns. Now, Cade Cunningham, I always like to do this whenever we have a top prospect in any sport. And whether it's the World Juniors, NCAA tournament, when the spotlight is on them, I always like to ask the experts about comparables. And I've heard a few on Cade Cunningham, but a pro comparable to Cade Cunningham, I know he's a guard. Maybe you can pick a guard, but maybe it's not the way the game's going. How would you categorize Cade Cunningham off the top of your head?
That's actually a good question. I haven't really ever thought about a pro comparison. Right off the top of my head, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Luka because you're not going to get him and he's not going to blow by you. He's not the quick point guard that's going to just get in the lane. He's relatively big. He's kind of slow, methodically moving kind of thing, but he just always makes good decisions with the ball. Not an outstanding three-point shooter, but can get hot. But he reminds me of Luka in the way he approaches the game. You always want the ball in his hands because he's always going to make the right decision, can get to the basket and score over some smaller guards. Like if you have a smaller guard on him, he's going to get in the lane and score over some smaller guards. So if off the top of my head, it was a great question. I would go Luka. I'd be interested to, have you heard any other ones for him?
I haven't. I've heard a real interesting one, but it's not a guard. It was Grant Hill, who's not a guard. And that was really intriguing to me. It really was. It almost reminds me of, I don't want to say Ben Simmons, but when you have a bigger guard who's, going to have the ball in his hands a lot, that's what it reminded me of. But Grant Hill wasn't like that. So it's weird.
That is a weird comparison. I kind of see the style of play, but yeah, Cade's a clear point guard, right? I mean, that's how he plays. He's always bringing up the ball, running the offense. So, but in terms of actual style of play, maybe that works a little bit. But yeah, I would lean Luka for me, but I'd be interested to see what other people would say too.
Is he good enough to carry the Cowboys?
I think he is.
Magical run. Magical.
Yeah, I think he is, right? Like, again, it just scares me sometimes if they match up with a team with some big guys. Like I mentioned Texas in the Big 12 championship, that Jericho Sims and some of the other Texas big guys, they just dominate Oklahoma State, rebounding, that kind of way. But like I mentioned before, if you have Cade on your team, you're always going to have a chance, right? So if they weren't playing in Illinois' region, I might have had them in my Final Four.
There you go. We started a little bit with Oklahoma State and how they can be a potential Final Four team. And it's just about the region, about the matchups, and not too favorable for the Cowboys. Kellen Forrest, tremendous stuff. Thank you so much. Let everyone know how they can find you, read you, watch you, listen to you.
Yeah, thanks. I run a college basketball show called On the Mic powered by the Garage Door Sports Network. Should have a little bit of an article coming out this week to get you maybe some upset picks, some what to watch out for in the tournament, a little more in depth than even I went on this show. And then yeah, I'm writing for a Canadian football site called CFP Perspective. So check me out there as well.
Kellen, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. We will definitely do this very soon. How does your routine go for the first 2 days of this tournament? I mean, it's got to be hectic. You're watching basketball all day like we all are. But is it one of those things where you get up like real early in the morning and just get, prepared for it?
Well, yeah, it's like Christmas morning. It's like two Christmas mornings for me those first 2 days, right? Because you wake up. There's basketball on when you wake up, and then there's basketball on when you go to bed, and there's 2 or 3 games going on at once at all times. So it's sometimes it's a little overwhelming. I will be honest, especially if you're a degenerate gambler and you're trying to gamble on all these games too, right? But I won't recommend that to anybody. But it is my first year actually betting on sports that I'm going to be able to bet on the tournament. So I'm happy, but I'm also nervous about that. But yeah, pretty much like you said, get up and watch basketball until I go to bed, and then do it again the next day.
Love it. And I got to say, and this is just my opinion, the first 2 days of the tournament, there's not many things that can compare to it in sports, really. It's two of my favorite days of the year. Of course, the rest of the tournament's great, but when you have it, it's called March Madness for a reason. The first 2 days really define that. Kellen, thank you again. That has been Lock It Up Sports Talk, a whole preview for the NCAA men's tournament, not in 2020, but yes, in 2021. We are back. Until next week, here we are, Lock It Up, signing off.